Scientists just sequenced DNA from a bone fragment buried in a German cave for 49,000 years. And when the results came back from the lab, what appeared on the screens made the entire research team go silent. Not partial sequences, not fragments. A complete human genome preserved in perfect detail. And the individual it belonged to, a man researchers now call Ranis 13, carried something in his DNA that rewrites everything science believed about when our species mixed with Neanderthals, who the first Europeans actually were, and why this man's entire bloodline vanished from Earth without leaving a single descendant alive today. Before we break down why these early Europeans represent a completely lost branch of humanity that split off from the rest of our species 50,000 years ago and disappeared without descendants, why the Neanderthal DNA in their genome rewrites the entire timeline of human-Neanderthal interbreeding, and what it means that a population of only a few hundred people survived 80 generations in Ice Age Europe before going extinct. Subscribe to Vault of Discovery. The discovery begins in 2016, when archaeologists excavating the Ilsenhöhle cave in Ranis, Germany, found 13 bone fragments scattered among stone tools, dating back 45,000 years. The pieces were so fragile that some came from infants. The bones were associated with a distinctive type of stone tool called LRJ, Lincolnbian Rhanischian Jersmanovican, blade technology that archaeologists had debated for decades. Nobody knew who made these tools. The craftsmanship was sophisticated. The design was unique. But were they created by the last Neanderthals desperately clinging to survival, or by the first modern humans pushing into Neanderthal territory from Africa? And here's the first shocking twist. The research team led by Arev Sumer extracted DNA from the 13 bone fragments and confirmed they belonged to at least 6 modern humans, not Neanderthals. 3 were male, 3 were female, 2 were infants. And buried in the genetic relationships was something extraordinary. A mother and her daughter, plus distant biological relatives. These weren't random casualties. This was a family. But mitochondrial DNA only tells a fragment of the story. It's inherited solely through the maternal line. The real breakthrough required nuclear DNA, the complete genome, and that meant finding bone fragments preserved well enough after 49,000 years. Think about what happened next. Among the 6 individuals, one femur bone, Ranis 13, turned out to be the best preserved modern human bone from the entire Pleistocene epoch ever found for DNA extraction. The preservation was so perfect that researchers could sequence his entire genome at high resolution. Not fragments, not partial sequences. Chromosome by chromosome reconstruction of every gene this man carried when he died 49,000 years ago. And 230 kilometers away in Zlatý Kun, Czechia, scientists had previously discovered a complete female skull from the same time period. When the team sequenced more DNA from her remains, the genetic data revealed something nobody expected. The woman from Zlatý Kun was a 5th or 6th degree relative of 2 individuals from Ranis, connected across 230 kilometers of Ice Age Europe, part of the same extended family network. Read that again. These weren't isolated wanderers. They were a small, tight-knit population spread across a vast territory, maintaining family connections across distances that would take weeks to traverse on foot, crafting the same style of stone tools, and surviving in one of the harshest environments Earth has ever produced. Ranis 13 and the Zlatý Kun woman now represent the oldest, high-quality modern human genomes ever sequenced. But the second devastating revelation came when geneticists analyzed the physical traits encoded in their genes. The Ranis and Zlatý Kun individuals carried genetic variants associated with dark skin, dark hair, and brown eyes, features reflecting their recent African origin. They looked nothing like the pale-skinned populations that would later dominate Europe. These were Africans, genetically speaking, who had left the continent only a few thousand years earlier. They were walking through frozen European forests with skin and hair color designed for African savanna sunlight. Think about the timeline compressing. 50,000 years ago, their ancestors were in Africa. 49,000 years ago, they were building fires in German caves, hunting reindeer across Czech steppes, and raising children in the coldest climate their species had ever encountered. And they did this while sharing the landscape with Neanderthals, a separate human species that had been living in Europe for over 200,000 years. Then came the third twist that changes everything about human evolution. When researchers analyzed the Neanderthal DNA segments in Ranis 13's genome, they dated the interbreeding event to between 45,000 and 49,000 years ago, thousands of years more recent than previous estimates. And here's what makes this discovery so profound. Every single non-African person alive today carries this same Neanderthal ancestry. From China to Peru, from Norway to Australia, if your ancestors didn't stay in sub-Saharan Africa, you have roughly 2 to 3% Neanderthal DNA in your genome. Read that carefully. Around 45,000 to 49,000 years ago, a coherent ancestral non-African population must have existed. A single group of modern humans that mixed with Neanderthals in one major interbreeding event, then dispersed across the entire planet, carrying that genetic legacy with them. Ranis 13 was part of that population. His genome contains the genetic signature of that exact moment when two human species came together and interbred. Think about what this does to the human family tree. The Ranis and Zloty Kun population represents the earliest known divergence from the group of modern humans that migrated out of Africa and later dispersed across Eurasia. They split off from the main lineage around 50,000 years ago, right after leaving Africa but before the major Neanderthal interbreeding event. They were pioneers, the first wave, the earliest modern humans to push into Europe. And then something went catastrophically wrong. But the fourth twist is the one that keeps geneticists awake at night. Researchers found no evidence that this population contributed to later Europeans or any other worldwide population. Zero genetic trace. The Ranis and Zloty Kun lineage didn't just decline, it vanished completely. By analyzing shared DNA segments, researchers estimate their population consisted of at most a few hundred individuals spread across a large territory. Modern conservation biologists consider any population under 500 individuals critically endangered. Think about the math. A few hundred people scattered across Ice Age Europe, trying to survive temperatures that dropped to -20 degrees Celsius, hunting megafauna with stone-tipped spears, competing with Neanderthals who had 200,000 years of evolutionary adaptation to the same environment. The Ranis and Zloty Kun population lasted approximately 80 generations, roughly 2,000 years, before disappearing entirely. 80 generations of families raising children, crafting tools, maintaining culture, and then extinction. No descendants, no genetic legacy. And here's where the mystery deepens. Other ancient humans from the same time period in Europe and Asia show signs of much more recent Neanderthal interbreeding. In some cases, Neanderthal ancestors were just 10 to 20 generations back. But Ranis 13 and the Zloty Kun woman showed no evidence of recent Neanderthal admixture. Their Neanderthal DNA came exclusively from the ancient interbreeding event shared by all non-Africans. They were living alongside Neanderthals for 2,000 years without interbreeding. Think about what that tells you about social structure 45,000 years ago. These weren't mindless hunter-gatherers. They were organized groups with kinship networks spanning hundreds of kilometers, shared technological traditions, and apparently strong cultural barriers, preventing interbreeding with Neanderthals they coexisted with. And yet, despite this organization, despite this cultural cohesion, despite surviving for 80 generations in the harshest environment their species had ever encountered, they failed. But the final game-changing truth emerges from understanding what happened next. While the Ranis and Zloty Kun population was going extinct in Europe, another wave of modern humans was moving out of Africa, the population that would eventually give rise to all present-day Europeans, Asians, Native Americans, and Oceanians. This second wave carried the same Neanderthal DNA from the same ancient interbreeding event, but they succeeded where Ranis 13's people failed. The question that haunts paleoanthropology is simple. Why? Was it population size? The second wave might have arrived with larger numbers, more genetic diversity, better resistance to demographic collapse. Was it timing? Maybe they arrived during a slightly warmer climatic period, when resources were more abundant. Was it technology? Perhaps they brought innovations, better hunting strategies, improved clothing, more efficient fire-making techniques. Or was it something we can't see in DNA? Social organization, language complexity, cultural practices that made the difference between extinction and global conquest. Research analyzing 51 ancient genomes from Ice Age Europe shows that beginning 37,000 years ago, all Europeans come from a single founding population that persisted through the Ice Age. The founding population had some deep branches in different parts of Europe, but around 19,000 years ago, populations re-expanded across Europe after the Ice Age peaked. The genetic data shows prehistoric human populations contained 3 to 6% Neanderthal DNA, but today most humans only have about 2%. Natural selection has been removing Neanderthal ancestry over time, because some Neanderthal genetic variants are slightly harmful to modern humans. Think about the bigger picture. The Ranis and Zlati Kun people were part of the same species that would build cities, write symphonies, and send satellites into orbit. They had the same cognitive capacity, the same potential, the same fundamental humanity. And they died out completely while their genetic cousins, humans who left Africa just a few thousand years later, succeeded beyond measure. Large-scale studies of Ice Age Europe reveal that climate change had a significant impact on prehistoric human populations. Hunter-gatherers coped with severe climatic changes between 47,000 and 7,000 years ago, but population sizes declined sharply during the coldest periods. In some regions like Western Europe, Ice Age populations even faced extinction and were eventually replaced by new groups migrating from Eastern Europe. Research on Ice Age Europeans suggests populations were much smaller than the stable size for healthy reproduction, usually around 500 people. In some cases, small bands of potentially as few as 20 to 30 people could have been moving over very large areas, over the whole of Europe as a single territory. Such small groupings may have led to reduced fitness and even extinctions. The genomes sequenced from hunter-gatherers between 14,000 to 7,500 years ago show that genetic diversity across most of Western and Central Europe after the Ice Age was very limited, indicating a major demographic bottleneck triggered by human isolation and extinction during the Ice Age. The difference between extinction and world domination came down to factors so subtle that 49,000 years later, geneticists are still trying to identify them. Published in Nature in December 2024, the study represents a watershed moment in understanding human prehistory. The genomes of Ranis 13 and the Zlati Kun woman answered questions that have plagued anthropology for decades, while raising new ones that may take another generation to resolve. We now know when modern humans and Neanderthals interbred. We know the first Europeans had dark skin. We know small pioneer populations pushed into Ice Age Europe, and some failed catastrophically. But we still don't know why some groups survived while others vanished, what role climate played versus population size versus pure chance, or whether the Ranis population's extinction was inevitable or preventable. One thing is absolutely certain. Ranis 13 died 49,000 years ago, his genetic line extinct within 80 generations. His DNA, preserved by accident in a femur bone, now reveals a lost chapter nobody knew existed until December 2024. A pioneer population split from the main out-of-Africa migration, pushed into Ice Age Europe, coexisted with Neanderthals for 2,000 years, and then vanished without leaving a single genetic trace in the 8 billion humans alive today. They were us, same species, same cognitive abilities, same evolutionary potential, and extinction found them anyway. So ask yourself, if a population of modern humans with the same intelligence we possess today could survive 80 generations in Ice Age Europe and still go extinct, what does that tell you about how fragile human survival actually is? Stay tuned.